I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's the regular council meeting for Monday, March 20th, 2023. It's 6 p.m. in the council chambers. Item number 2, land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional lands of the Acadia First Nation, part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'd like to take a moment before we move on to the playing of O Canada to recognize the unfortunate passing of former councillor Ken Crosby. Ken's a wonderful man and served diligently on council for many years, and became personally friendly with many of the councillors. So he was a very nice and well-respected man. And out of respect to Ken and the family, I'd like to just take a moment of silence now. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to move on to item 3, the playing of O Canada. Item 4, approval of the agenda. Additions, deletions. Councillor Cushing, you're moving the approval. The seconder. Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Item 5, declarations of any conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts this evening? Okay, there being none, move on to item 6, approval of the minutes. 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4 for the various times. Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Competition over here. First of all, I will happily approve the minutes, but there are, on February 9th, there are a couple of errors that I would like to point out. I'm sorry the teacher comes out in me. Number 1, it says in attendance for a portion of the meeting, it should be was presenter. And then number 2, just little boo-boos. 9.3, we have Councillor Cushing to recommend to regular council. That should be 1L, not 2. And then it says retiring the debt on the administration building and that be funded and that it be funded from the operating reserve. And on that note, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented with the amendments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durkee. Was seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hurlbert. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Old business, item 7, 7.1, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee package. We've got a linked document. What's the will of council? Yes, Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just as a recap for council, in your package tonight is the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that you passed, along with the terms of reference, and also included is the standard application form for citizens who would like to be appointed by council as citizen representatives on your committees. And the last time we checked in on this process, what we had been directed to do as a staff was to take the package and have a legal review done and make sure everything was in order in preparation to go live with this standing committee of council. So we've done that. There were no material changes. There were just a few recommendations around providing more clarity on the form. There's no material changes recommended to the policy, to the terms of reference, or to the application form. So I have it before you tonight, council, recommending that council begin to make plans to make its appointments to the standing committee and for permission to advertise for your citizen reps.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Do we have a motion that somebody wants to put on the floor to do that work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have carefully read through and appreciate all the work that's been done on this diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. What I have noted is that we have to get the advisory committee before we can approve the policy, it looks like. If I'm mistaken, please correct me, because it says, advise municipal council on creating a diverse and inclusive community by reviewing the bylaws, policies, and programs. So do we have to appoint people to the committee and have the committee review the policy before we can actually approve that?
So I think my understanding of the act, as well as what I think I heard council say, was this committee would actually look at all of our policies and bylaws and make recommendations to council. So this policy is already approved, it's already on the books, and when this committee is formed, they may take a look at this policy and they may recommend policy changes to council.
Okay, thank you very much. And so on that point, then I would make a motion that we approve the diversity, equity, inclusion policy, D-045-22, sorry, with the terms of reference and for the committee.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I might not have been clear. So what I'm looking for tonight is permission to advertise for the
sorry.
citizen reps.
I'll make a motion.
We've approved it.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So we had
I
already
might not have been
approved
clear.
this policy.
Correct.
Yes, so I'll make a motion that we begin the advertising for the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Durkee.
Sorry,
Do you have
my
a seconder?
mistake.
Seconded in Councillor Daniel Allen. Any further discussion or comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Comment.
Councillor Holbert.
I think it's more of a comment. I just want to thank staff for doing the work on this important process of who we are as a municipality. And when we talk about the application form, just for clarity, on the last page, page 3 of 3, the self-identifying, can you refresh my memory, those have always been there, or we have added that because we are looking for members for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee?
It's a brand new section. I think it got added because of our work around this standing committee, but I would suggest that this should have been on the form anyway, because this application form applies to all of council's committees.
Okay, so this isn't just specifically for this committee, it's
No.
going to be for every
Everything.
committee moving forward?
Correct.
Okay, perfect, great work, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question. We've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Council.
Mr. Chair, if I could, so
Madam
just to let
CEO.
council know then, on your next committee, the whole agenda, you'll see an agenda item for you to consider making your appointments to the seats for the elected representatives on this committee. So you may want to be thinking about how you want to proceed in that nature. So that'll be on your April committee, the whole agenda.
Very good. Thank you. Item 8, new business, recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. We have 3 of them. What's the will of council? Councillor Holton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make a motion that we arrange for presenters from the Mersey Tobiatic Research Institute and invite them to council for a presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. We've got a seconder and Councillor Allen. Any further discussion on the item? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Councillor. Item 8.1.2, CAO Committee Appointment. What's the will of Council? Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, because through our terms of reference and stuff, I'll be stepping down from that committee, and I would like to make a motion that we appoint Sherry Hurlbert to the CAO committee.
Okay, thank you. We have a mover, seconded by Councillor Durkee. Any additional discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Item 8.1.3, CAO Committee Terms of Reference. Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion in that the Municipality of District of Yarmouth update the terms of reference for the CAO Committee Terms of Reference, Section 5, to reflect the contract services that we have undertaken.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Allen. Additional conversation on the topic? Okay, there being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 9, correspondence for action, amendments to the activity. Oh, sorry. My apologies. I missed the most important agenda item. Definitely. In all seriousness. Local 8.2, local improvement bylaw with Park Drive / Sealand Avenue residents. And I'll look to our CEO for an update. You met with the residents, and perhaps you could bring council up to date. And then we'll have some comments certainly from some of the councillors, I'm sure.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So there had been a number of residents from Park Drive and Sealand Avenue express an interest in leveraging the local improvement bylaw to make some changes to the roads that they live on. So a group of the staff met with the residents, and we went through the bylaw in terms of interpreting the terms in the bylaw and how they would be applied to improvements to their road network. We went through the sections of the bylaw with respect to how does a community qualify for the bylaw? What is the petition process? What is the information package? In terms of the petition, what's the threshold in terms of support from the community in order to get a proposal to council? And then we reviewed with them a little bit about how council would review the material, and then we did a deep dive into how the charges would be calculated. And so we went through all of the terms in the bylaw with respect to frontage and how that's treated. We split the meeting up into two halves. So we kind of went through the bylaw a little bit up into the money piece. And then we had some documents laid out for the community members who were there to take a look at. So we had all of the surveys that showed all of the property lines with the frontage based on the subdivisions so that the frontage amounts were accurate. And then we had some spreadsheets available so that residents could see what their share of a project might shake out to be like. And then we came back to the table and we talked a little bit about how the charge is calculated, how the charge is paid back to the municipality, and kind of how it's administered. And so there were really good questions from the community. I think there was a lot of dialogue back and forth. We were with them for about an hour and a half. The community does not qualify for the bylaw right now, and they understand that. They noted some elements in the bylaw that I think in some people's view might not be equitable, and so I anticipate that council may hear from some of the residents in terms of parts of the bylaw which, because they don't qualify right now, maybe can be improved in the meantime until the community does qualify.
Thank you. Comments from council. Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if our CAO could provide us with reasoning for why they don't qualify at this time?
Sure. So there are three metrics that have to be a yes in order to qualify. And one of the metrics is that the road being considered has to be a road, the road being considered has to be serviced by a road that is already paved. So Park Drive is serviced by Brooklyn Street, and it is paved. But Park Drive does not have 2/3 of the lots on it that have dwellings on them. And so that's a trigger. And then the third piece is around 2/3 of the property owners have to sign the petition. So Park Drive doesn't qualify. Sealand Avenue is serviced by Park Drive, which is not paved, so it doesn't qualify, but it does meet the threshold for the lots with dwellings on them, 2/3. So in order for a petition to get filed with council, all three of those have to be yeses in order to trigger the bylaws. So both roads only have 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 yeses.
Okay, thank you. It's a good question. Additional questions from council? Comments? You first. Okay, I'll go first. So I've been at the council table, and I think it's a good thing in a way for extended period of time, and I was here very early on in my tenure when the bylaw actually came into effect. I think it's on there, 2009. So anyway, my recollection is when we spoke to the CEO of the day, Ken Moses, is I mean, there's nothing in there that explicitly prohibits us and why would it in effect? Because we do own those roads, right? We own the subdivision, Lake Estate Court, just down here by Ray's service station. We also own, for people in the audience and watching online, we also own Park Drive and Sealand Avenue. So those are the two roads that we own outright. There are other roads that we share in their maintenance and so forth with the province, but most of the roads in the municipality of District of Yarmouth are owned by the province and maintained by the province in whole. So in any event, there's nothing in the bylaw that sort of expressly prohibits us from, in my understanding, from improving the road or spending money on the road, including paving it, part, whole, all these types of things. So that's the first point I wanted to bring to the table. So me personally as a councillor, I wouldn't be opposed to paying, for part or whole, depending on what the community comes to us with, of the charges for surfacing, part of the road or all the road or all those types of things. I think it would be dependent on obviously the bylaw in place does have the community coming to us when they decide what they want to do and what they want to propose. So that's the process as I understand it, having reviewed the bylaw, the local improvement bylaw. So it's really a decision of council in that respect. So I guess also I wanted to say that we do own the road again. So residents of Park Drive, stating the obvious, and Sealand Avenue, they do pay lots of taxes. It's a higher density area than most areas in the municipality. The lot sizes are, they're quite, they're fairly large, but they're subdivision size. So that's what we're really pushing for, density. And you don't really have increased density and not paved roads, right? You don't kind of go that way. Fortunately, the province funds, most residents, most of the roads in the community kind of to the driveway, right? Which we don't, we own these roads. There are some dirt roads as well, certainly, that the province maintains. So I think they do deserve, council's attention on Park Drive, and specifically, there's two spots, I think, to begin with that we really need to focus on. Number one, that J-class, I think, portion, which is the paved portion going into Park Drive. And so I think we should have staff look at that and councilors look at that. I understand that we can nominate yearly, and that's in September, that for cost-shared paving. We looked over it this year, but it's in bad shape. It's even the paved section's potholed. And then there's the next section, and I'm not sure just what's wrong with that, but it's probably a couple hundred meters long, I'm guessing, but it potholes frequently. There may be some standing water issues, some construction issues with it, but it seems really, really hard to keep it, for staff to keep it smooth. So I mean, I'd like to see some engineering work done in the coming fiscal to understand what we're dealing with, because we do own the road. So to identify the issue there, that's sort of my view. And again, we've got a lot of people paying lots of taxes, so in that subdivision, and there's continued construction there. It's a going concern for sure. So, you know, I'd like to suggest that, you know, maybe not tonight, but the council puts their mind to, you know, doing some engineering over the next year on that first section that's really potholed, to see what the issue is, because we do own it. I think we do need to identify what the issue is with and why it's potholing so badly. And then probably with the community, you know, some of the thresholds haven't been made or achieved to consider it necessarily at this point, the 2/3 piece the CAO talked about. But as time goes along, I think incrementally we should be thinking about solving the issue for the community, because it's an important part of our community. Lots of people live there and have invested heavily in the community. So for those reasons, I think it's a really, really important thing. So having said that, there's no further comment. We'll move on to the... Mr. Chair. Yes. Oh, there is all kinds of... I think I've got selective vision. I don't know. Maybe.
I said you first. Oh,
Oh, Nick
wonderful.
first, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually agree, Deputy Warden. I think if I could get the Cleveland and Ellis Road paved, I would retire a happy person, like I would. So roads and sidewalks seem to be one of the most sought after thing, but we know as a municipality they're one of the most costly things in our budget. For the most part, doesn't really make that affordable, but I think everyone has the right to live on a paved road. I've talked to a couple residents from that meeting, and I do have a couple questions for the CAO, or they talked to me. Just, what's my question? Do you feel the bylaw, because it hasn't really been tested before, correct?
Right.
Do you feel that it is feasible? That I've heard numbers between 20 and 75,000 being what someone might have to pay to make that, to pave that road for each individual house. Now, there's some people that are closer to retirement that have some savings that are willing to do that, but then there's new families on that road that it may break them. So I guess my first question to you is, do you feel like the policy when you read it is feasible? It makes it accessible for our residents?
The way the bylaw is structured honors one of the basic tenets of public administration, and that is that people should pay for the services that they get. And so what this bylaw says is the road is at a certain standard, a level of service that council chose to have it at in order to accept it. If the residents want to increase the level of service, this is a mechanism where that can happen, but they have to pay for it. Now, this bylaw does have a caveat that for safety reasons, council can choose to pave it. I'm not so sure I agree that even if council chose to pave it, that the way the bylaw is worded right now, that council could fund it through the general rate, because I see words like shall be funded by a charge in the bylaw. So we would have to have a legal opinion on that. When you talk about paving a road, the cost to pave it will depend on what the subsurface looks like and how much work is required to bring it up to a standard where it can even be paved, and then the cost of paving. And so, I mean, I want to be careful when I say what I'm about to say, that I am not saying that this project would cost this much money. I'm putting this number out there for conversation. If we say that right now, rule of thumb is $1 million a kilometer to pave a road, that is what it is. And if you have a finite number of properties to pay for that, that's what you've got in terms of your community available to pay for that. So is it feasible? Is it accessible? You're quite right, Councillor Hilton. The spectrum of residents on those two roads is quite broad. We have individuals on that road, on those roads, who are retired, likely own their home, and maybe have a little more disposable income to put towards paying for an improvement like that. We have families on that road who are new residents. I don't know, it could be their first home. They could be working on retiring a mortgage, I don't know. And so even paying, $25,000 or $30,000, even over 10 years, could be a stretch for residents in that situation. And that's why I think at the time, this whole bylaw was written such that it comes from the community. If the community wants it and they're willing to pay for it, then they can have it.
Yeah, so does the, next question, the bylaw doesn't, is there additional funds that could be applied to for road paving? Could you ever go to the province or to help subsidize the residents in making that happen? And does the bylaw, the way it is, even allow for that, or where do you collaborate to make that happen?
Sure, great question, Councillor Hilton. So my understanding of the intent when the bylaw was written, and it's certainly the way that myself and the Director of Finance would administer the bylaw today, is that we would absolutely make recommendations to Council that if the community came and wanted this, and Council agreed it was a priority, we would always provide you with your options within the law to apply other sources of funding to mitigate the cost to the residents. So if there were infrastructure dollars available, if there were Building Canada Fund, gas tax funds available, we would absolutely make Council aware of that so that you knew what all of your options were in order to fund a project.
And do you want to go? One more question.
Yes, absolutely.
I guess for me, not knowing the price of what that road is, it's even hard for me to comment on Trevor's comments. So at what point do we look at can our public works engineer, do a rough estimate on what that might cost us? Is that possible, so that we know? We only have 2 roads. It would really be good, or 3 roads. It'd be really good to have an understanding of what it costs to do that, because I live on a paved road that's covered by the province. I'll always live on a paved road covered by the province. And although I'm not paying it out of the tax rate, I live on a paved road. I think it's a requirement. So, yeah.
Right. So the way I understand the bylaw, the package that will go to Council that includes the petition requires a certain level of information that can only be gathered by collaborating with our offices here. So at some point, some level of order of magnitude figures are required in order for the community to even file their petition. And that's because when the advocates for the petition go to their neighbors to get signatures, they have to provide information around the costing. So if Council wanted to, through our budget deliberations, instruct me to include provision for a certain amount of money to do some engineering on that road and do some order of magnitude costing, then absolutely we would do that. My recommendation would be that we invest in costing that is a higher level of confidence than Class D, which is often what we do when we're doing order of magnitude. Just because construction prices are so volatile right now, you may want something a little more accurate, something closer to, Class B and maybe even Class A, which is as close as you get before you tender, just so that the information is accurate as possible. Because a Class D, before the pandemic, could be plus or minus 25%. So, absolutely, Councillor Hilton, that work can be done at Council's pleasure.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Next up, oh yes, Councillor Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 questions/comments. Can we start maybe through you to the CAO and give a overview of what we as a municipality have done to maintain and mitigate some of those problems in the past? So just so that people in the gallery and people watching and the residents know that it's not like we've just left them hung out to dry if they're, potholey roads. So could you maybe give an update on what we do regularly?
Sure. So Park Drive, when you enter Park Drive for, I'm going to say maybe half a kilometer, it's called what's a J-class road. So that's a road that's owned by the province, but the municipality and the province cost share on the maintenance of it. So the municipality has no authority over the maintenance treatments of that. As the Deputy Warden mentioned, there is a program that's available annually whereby council could nominate that section of road for capital upgrades, and those upgrades would be cost shared between the province and the municipality. If the road is nominated, it doesn't mean the province will agree to do it, because they take their pot of money for that project across the province and they assign it to the roads that they feel need the most attention. So one year we might get a road awarded a project, and 2 years we might not, because there might be roads elsewhere in Nova Scotia. So that's that section. The remainder of this of Park Drive and Sealand Avenue were turned over to the municipality by the developer at a certain standard. And by and large, the road is wide. The road is in fairly good shape. We do a chloride treatment once a year to keep the dust down, and we do grading at least twice a year. We do some spot grading in between those 2 major gradings. There is a section of Park Drive following the end of the provincial section, probably for another quarter of a kilometer maybe, where we seem to have a continuing problem with potholes. And I think that's where the Deputy Warden was mentioning perhaps we should do some engineering investigation on that section to see if the subsurface needs some major recapitalization in order to prevent that potholing, which would have to be done before you paved it anyway. You can't have underneath your blacktop washing away all the time. So whether the project moved ahead to pave the road or not, that problem would have to be fixed over time.
Okay, and my second question through you to the Madam CAO, what happens, so we know that less than the majority of lots for the policy, for things to kind of be enacted, are not sold. So the developer owns those. What happens to, so if the residents who own houses now have to pay whatever amount they have to pay based on their frontage, the unsold lots, what happens to those? Like if we get to the point where we say, okay, we're going to do this cost share, then we have all of these unsold lots, where does that, how does that play out?
So the inequity is not because the lots are unsold.
Okay.
The inequity comes because there are lots without dwellings on them, and under the current terms of the bylaw, those lots without dwellings on them and no driveway entrances only pay a share of the total project cost based on half their frontage. And there are residents in the community who view that as inequitable, because the people who own the undeveloped lots, if they thought that the project was going to go ahead, they would wait until the project is done, because when the charge is levied, the charge is levied. There's no changes after that. So if I own the land next door to the Deputy Warden and I find out council's going to do this project, I'm not doing anything on my lot till after the project is done, and I'm only paying half of my frontage, where the Deputy Warden would be paying all of their frontage. So that's what it's about, frontage, and it's about whether or not there are dwellings on the property. Because to the Deputy Warden's point, it's the existence of density that would drive the investment in the upgrade of the level of service on this road. So did that answer your question?
I think so, but just, so help me understand, whoever owns those without residents on them,
would
without a
still
house on
have
them,
to pay,
still have to
but
pay, but
only
only
half.
half of what they would if they had a house on the
dwelling
property?
on it, yep.
Or dwelling on the property. Okay.
And I should say, if I could, Councillor
Yep,
Hurlbert,
sure.
it doesn't matter how many dwellings are on the property. So we have a PID that has several dwelling units on it. They're quadruplexes.
Right.
it doesn't matter how many dwelling units are on the land in order to qualify for the bylaw, as long as there's one dwelling unit on it. Because it's, the charge is calculated on frontage. It has nothing to do with how many dwelling units are on the property.
Okay.
I just want everybody to be clear on that.
Okay, and I have one more thing. So moving forward, I know Councillor Hilton and Deputy Warden have talked about some things, but how do we address this? Do we wait for the residents to come to us? We know we're going into capital budget discussions. I'm just not sure how we move it forward to the positive or to continue as we are.
So as staff was preparing for the cafe session with the residents, you know, to the Deputy Warden's point, the bylaw was enacted in 2009, and it's not currently on your legislative agenda for review, but I would recommend that council start with a fulsome review of the bylaw.
Even before or while we're going through the capital budget process? Because
I would suggest
them
that
would
this,
take a-
I would suggest this project is not that imminent, that we
Right,
have time to
okay.
do the bylaw review first.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Unless I hear something different from council, and that changes the water on the beans.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
If I may interject, and any engineering costs would likely come from the operations
Yes.
side.
Yep.
Right, so
Yep.
that may clarify it more.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, all good questions, Councillor Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor
So
Allen.
again, through you to the Madam CAO. So we are entering into the spring season. I've had a couple councilors mention the condition of the road for that 200 or 300 feet after the pavement. Do we have a schedule set? Can you speak to whether or not our Public Works Department has a schedule set as to when they will be down there to grade that, to smoothen that over? Or, like, I'm sure it's on a schedule at some point. Is there something we can do in the interim to make that road a little bit better until we can do the full grading? Like, is there something we can do to help the residents right now?
We do a couple of things. So we do have a blade on one of our machines. The jury's out on whether or not that improves or not the situation. I've heard residents who seem to have a body of knowledge who are on both sides of that argument. We absolutely do some gravel filling in the potholes. It doesn't get compacted in, so if you get a heavy rain, sometimes it'll wash out. For this season coming, because the density has increased so much since the last year, where we normally grade twice a year, I think you'll see in the operations budget provision to grade a third time and get another grading in there with the grader. That we hire that done. We don't have the machine to do that. So I'm hoping that that will make some improvement. It's difficult to maintain a good quality on the road with the heavy construction traffic that's there. We know that there are a number of building permits already in the queue for this year as well, that there are going to be more dwelling units constructed on that road this coming year. So it is a challenge, and the Public Works Department is very aware of the challenges, and they're committed to keeping a close eye on that road and doing what they can to mitigate.
So for any of the residents that are maybe here or watching or wondering, like, do we have some, since we're hearing how bad that is, do we have some type of plan? I mean, even some type of fix to get us by, a Band-Aid, I know nobody wants to hear that word, but a Band-Aid to get us by until such time as the grader is going to be going through, or to Deputy Warden's point, you know, should we be looking right now at having someone come in and tell us, and maybe looking at that road to give us some ideas of how we can fix that first 200 feet until we get to the point where maybe we are seriously looking at paving it? You know, and
I think it was approximately 3 years ago, we did a significant re-graveling program on that road, and it helped for a little while, so we can definitely take a look at that again. So that's bringing in more aggregate, high-quality aggregate, and putting it over the whole surface of the road and seeing if that helps keep conditions better for longer. As I said, you know, we can fill potholes, we can use our own blade in the interim. The first grading of the spring normally happens in late April after the rain is done. I'm not an expert on this, but I understand that if you do too much before the frost comes out and the rains are done, you could do more damage to the road. I think, so that's my understanding. So that's why the timing of the first grading is when it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Durkee, you've got to be quicker on the button.
No, it's okay. I developed my questions along the way, so. Okay, first of all, right now, most of the dirt roads in the county are an absolute mess. And we have to wait until the conditions are right for even TIR to get out there and make improvements. I know I drove on a section of the Lake George Road yesterday, and it was brutal, like the worst I've ever seen it, with potholes. So that brings me to the questions. Why did the developer turn it over to us? Like, we have 2 subdivisions, I know, that the developer, you know, built, or, you know, how or why? Because, you know, many other people are living on private roads, and we don't own those. So how did they become ours? Through you to the CAO. Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
No problem. So it will be a very high-level summary, because I obviously don't have that file with me tonight, but it's my understanding when the permissions and approvals were given to develop those lands when they were greenfield, so when it was brambles and field and whatnot, when the deal was done, the council of the day agreed that if the road was built to, the roads, 2 of them, were built to a certain standard, council would agree to take them over. And that can happen today. When a developer does a development agreement with council, they can negotiate to have the road turned over to the municipality.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yep.
Like, what happens when there are new subdivisions built today where roads are put in? It doesn't mean it's automatic that we're going to take responsibility for that, correct?
That's correct, Councillor Durkee. And it's part of the negotiation between council and the developer.
Okay, because like I think about all the private roads there are, and we've had many requests for subdivisions today, and I would be very afraid if the municipality took over all these roads and had to pave them, because I know it would be extremely costly. And so you've answered most of my questions. My last one is, how many homes are there in that area? Any idea?
Do you recall, Jenny? Yeah, it's handy to 30 between the 2 roads altogether.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's more than I thought.
Yeah.
And then we have another subdivision too, where, you know, the concerns have been raised before about paving that subdivision. So, you know, if that was even a consideration, we couldn't do for one and not for the other, because that just, I guess, well, maybe they'd have to ask for it. So I do agree with looking at how can we maintain it in a better way, and if that requires some engineering to help us decide that, that's, you know, something I would certainly consider. Whether that means paving or not, that's different story as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hilton.
Thanks. So at no point am I saying we should take on more roads, but we now own 2 or 3 roads, and I do think that bylaw is inadequate to deal with those roads and how we will further develop those roads. Just one question to the CAO. Does the province ever take over roads? Can we pass the buck?
No, and that's part of what the J-Class Roads deal was all about. If memory serves me correctly, I'm going way, way back, but in the service exchange that happened a couple of decades ago, the J-Class Roads cost-sharing agreement was part of that. The province was looking for ways to better handle the cost of keeping up with roads and maintaining them. And so in cases where towns had to take over complete responsibility for some roads and bridges, rural municipalities became part of a cost-sharing agreement with the province.
Okay, so with that, sounds like we're going to own these roads for a considerable amount of time, and you know, I think of roads like in Council Cushion's district, like Green Rock Drive, that's a private driveway, and they've been told several times, I think they need to do significant infrastructure, you know, to bring it up to par, to get to the point where we'd even have a conversation around this table about taking it over. And then once we take it over, they would be, if we were to ever take it over, then they would be in the same position this road is. They'd need to come up with $1 million to then pave it. So I feel like the system's kind of set up to fail them a little bit. So, you know, I would like to review the bylaw in the inequalities in it, maybe mention about where we partner to further look at grants and provincial and federal funding, and maybe even a piece to when we would look at doing the cost of the engineering. Maybe that's something we do up front so they know where they're going with it. So I'd either, you know, we could talk about it at the next committee of the whole if you guys want some time to think about it, but I would be willing to make that a motion that we at least start by looking at the bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden.
Is there a seconder? There's a motion.
You got a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there's a motion being made. Oh,
Oh, yeah, my understanding was, there wasn't a motion. Yeah.
Am I allowed
Councillor
to talk
Cushing?
now? My turn? Okay. First of all, thank you to Councillor Hilton for bringing up about Green Rock Drive. And I just wanted to do some clarification on how Green Rock Drive come to be what it is today. Originally, when that development was done, the developer and the Department of Highways had an agreement on how it should be finished. The Department of Highways did their part by making the road wide, ditching, and to Nova Scotia standards. Oh, excuse me. Unfortunately, when it came time for the developer to do his part of graveling the road, he reneged on it and never done it. So therefore, it fell in a quagmire. It wasn't done up to the level it was supposed to have been done. And I have, as the council that were here from my first term here know that I argued quite heavily on why it wasn't looked after properly, and that is the reason why. The developer never held up his end of the bargain, and now it's up to the citizens who live on that drive to come together to make to form a association or put money up to have it done properly. So that's what that is. And that's why it is what it is, and it's a very there's a lot of very unhappy residents there. It's a wonderful place to live. It's just a heck of a place to get in there. And maybe I won't say any more else, but there's other reasons why for Parkland Drive too, but we'll leave that alone.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cushing. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we own 3 roads. How many J-class roads do we have through you to Madam Chair? So obviously you don't know that.
so it's J, K, L, and M, first of all, that fall into the agreement. By it's, sometimes it's easier, but it's less than 100 kilometers of road.
So as we move forward, is that a list that could be made available to us so we could see what roads in our communities? Because I've had discussions about a couple roads in my community as well that are in miserable condition.
Yep.
And, you know, Department of Transportation kind of says, well, this is the type of road. I just want to make sure, you know. And as far as to Councillor Hilton, if he's going to make a motion to review the bylaw, I will definitely be seconding it, because we can always bring things can always be better. But unfortunately, this is probably not going to be a popular opinion, but I'll say it anyway. Roads are not like our parents. We couldn't choose our parents, but we choose where we live. We choose where we buy our houses and where we build our houses. You know, and if I found the perfect house and it's on a dirt road, and, you know, I want to buy it, that's where I want to live, that's where I want to live. You know, would I look to have it paved at some point? Probably. Do I think it's my right to have it paved? Probably not. But, I mean, everybody deserves to, I guess deserves to be on a, but when you find your forever home, if it's a dirt road or if it's not a dirt road and you buy it and that's where you're living, you know, but I do believe that we own this road and it should definitely be maintained. And if there's issues with it right now, then we should be dealing with them. And as far as the paving aspect, to Councillor Hilton's point, if we want to relook at the bylaw to make it, you know, maybe, I don't know if easier is the word, to access a way to get it paved, then, you know, we should be looking at the bylaw for sure. So, but that's just one person's opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go back to a comment Councillor Hilton made and an issue he brought up, which is an important issue to put on the table tonight. And it's around legacy issues to do with privately owned subdivision roads. So as you remember, we did a fulsome review of the subdivision bylaw not long ago. And these legacy issues, especially the one that was discussed here tonight, Green Rock Drive, are complicated, they're difficult to solve. We have quote-unquote roads in the municipality that do not even have their own property identification number. And so in terms of trying to do anything legally with them, it's very difficult because they're not their own land entity in and of themselves. So when the subdivision bylaw was reviewed, there was a mechanism put in place that when a parcel of land is subdivided and we reach a certain number of parcels, the road has to become its own PID, and then a homeowners association must be created, and the homeowners association is owned by the property owners who abut that road, and they create their own resources through the homeowners association to look after the road, and they all own, the homeowners association owns the road, and they're all members of the homeowners association. And this stops some of the legacy issues around, for example, we've got private roads where the developer has passed away and the heirs don't have the resources to keep the road up. It's not that people don't want to sometimes, that the developer passed away and the heirs can't do it, or people move away and they don't do anything with the roads. So moving forward on when subdivisions are created and private roads are constructed, there's mechanism in place to cover off the standard of construction for the road, as well as providing a mechanism for the ongoing maintenance of the road. So we have tightened that section up quite a bit, because to all the points that were made here tonight, some of the conditions of some of the private roads are challenging.
Councillor Hilton.
You'll let me speak a third time?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and I appreciate Madam CEO's comments. And I think we just did kind of bring that policy or bylaw up to speed, and I think this one needs a little bit of work as well. And just, you know, we talk about where you choose to live, but we just watched the provincial government wire every house with internet because it's now a requirement, and I kind of see paved roads similar. So I'll make a motion that we review. Do you want the actual name of the bylaw? Probably do.
Just local improvement bylaws.
Yeah, that we review the local improvement bylaw, or we ask staff to review the local improvement bylaw. And I'd like to include in the motion that we review the inequalities, a process for provincial or federal funding, and when and where we may look at costing out the engineering of our roads.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Allen seconds the motion. Further discussion? Question being called for. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, excellent. So my understanding, just to summarize, is we're going to look at the bylaw with all those pieces. We'll bring it back for conversation, and also potentially look at some potential engineering being done next fiscal type thing. in the meantime, just to understand what the issue is. So everybody's good with that? There's clarity around that issue? Okay. Just before we leave the issue, I will say that I do have, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole that Councillor Cushing went down. I'll mention where I live, and I live across the lake, and I do live on a dirt road. It's a private dirt road, to your point, and when I bought the property there, beautiful spot. I'm really been happy there. But having said that, it is kind of one of those legacy issues, and we get together as a group of homeowners and do the improvements to the plowing. So it's not obviously owned by the municipality, but to bring that up to standard would be almost impossible, right? To bring up the standard. So that will likely never happen. But that's something that we've kind of, as a council, over the time, over many years, we've improved our governance, we've improved our bylaws, and I guess that's why we passed the motion tonight, because this was done in 2009. It's some 14 years later. The bylaw, I don't think at the time was a bad piece of legislation. I think it was probably pretty good. But again, there's been a lot of development there, times have changed, and we need a little bit better tool to deal with the issues, Park Drive, Sealand Avenue, and the other roads certainly that we own as a municipality. So having said that, I'll move on to the next item of business, and it is, sorry. Correspondence, yes. That one's tough, the new business, tough to locate. Correspondence, item 9.1 for action, amendments to the activities, designation regulations, and solid waste management regulations. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your package, Council, is your carbon copy of a letter from the municipality of Barrington to the Honourable Tim Hallman regarding changes that are being made with respect to construction and demolition debris and what has to be done with it. And if you recall, a number of months ago, the general manager of WasteCheck was before Council discussing this change to this regulation and indicating for the District of Yarmouth there really wasn't a significant impact to the cost of waste management or to the way our Yarmouth County Solid Waste Park manages the waste. I suggested to the warden that this piece of correspondence be put under for action, because perhaps we should write to the board of the solid waste park and maybe just ask for a comment from them around the impact and how their operations may or may not change, just so you have it on the record where your colleagues in other municipalities are carbon copying you on their correspondence to the minister.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Sounds like a sound piece of advice. Councillor Hurlbert.
I'll make that motion, and then I have a comment, so I will make that motion that we write our Yarmouth County Solid Waste Park to get them to provide an update on what they are doing.
Okay, Councillor Hurlbert, I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Cushing's going to second, and correct? Yep. Yep, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Hurlbert, for your comment.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam CAO, for those comments. I'm on the both WasteCheck and the Solid Park boards, and that has been a discussion, and I know at the last Solid Waste Park board meeting, we did have a discussion on how we were going to handle some large users of treated timbers that have been coming into the solid waste park, and we were going to be sending them correspondence to say this is how we're going to be dealing with it and this is how we recommend you. But I think it would be great to have, you know, a written report on how we are doing it and that we don't see any major issues for our solid waste park, you know, in dealing with these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurlbert. I'll recognize you, yeah.
I was pretty much going to say what Councillor Hurlbert said, because I also sat on the Solid Waste Park, and I do know a letter has been sent off to Department of Highways about their demolition of repairs of bridges and stuff, that they're going to be required to take their own waste material directly to Liverpool. So it won't affect us at all, sort of thing. So because right now any treated material has to go as solid waste and go to Liverpool. It's heavy, and it's going to be costly. So we can divert that off to whoever's bringing that stuff to take it to Liverpool themselves. It's going to be to our benefit and the benefit to our taxpayers.
Thank you, Councillor. Any additional comment? Okay, seeing none, move on to the next item. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. All those in favor of the motion, signify by aye. All those opposed? Motion carried, thanks. Okay, next item, there's some correspondence. There are 3 items there for information. Any comment or question, concern about those 3 items? Oh, Councillor Houghton.
Thanks, and there's a letter there from Minister Maslin in the response to the Chebogue, the issues with the corner in Chebogue and the number of accidents, including the death last year, 2 accidents this spring already. And I know that they must get letters like this all the time. Do we, and through you to the CAO, is there any more we can do? I know it's a provincial road, a provincial corner. It's a pretty short letter in response. Is there any, just with the number of accidents that are happening, you know, in the high speeds, is there any more we can do to advocate for safety for our residents?
Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to Councillor Hilton, we are working right now to create a meeting with Council and your RCMP detachment commander. And so there are pieces around highway safety that we can talk with the RCMP about. And it's my understanding that the RCMP can also work with the province on some particularly problematic areas and collaborate to find some solutions. I do note that this response from Minister Maslin is a little bit different than some of our other responses. And she's sort of indicating, Minister Maslin is sort of indicating that maybe we might want to take this up with our local leader as well, area manager. So we haven't met with the area manager in quite some time. So that's probably something we can do as well, because she'll have a higher level of familiarity with this area. And I'm sure, Councillor Hilton, you've probably chatted with her and your residents have chatted with her, but perhaps in a meeting with council, we might be able to get more to the root of the problem.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And Madam CEO, would like a motion for that, or just maybe you could arrange that meeting by consensus? Is everybody all right with that? That's to arrange a meeting with the area manager?
With the minister. But
Yeah.
a conversation with the area manager would be something a little bit different.
Is that something council wishes to?
Yeah, I would like that.
Okay. Councillor Houghton.
I just need further clarity. We just accepted a meeting with Public Works at some point, didn't we not, or with?
So, but that's Minister Maslin.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the one.
I don't know if the area manager will be at that meeting or not. It's usually the minister, the deputy minister, or a special advisor.
If the suggestion is that we make contact with the area manager, I'll make that a motion.
You make that a motion? Yeah. Okay, we've got a mover. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Cushing seconds. Additional conversation? Motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Any additional comment on the 4 information items of correspondence? Okay. Warden's report. Our warden is away for the meeting, obviously, and because I'm chairing, he's filed a report. It's not yet linked to the agenda, but will be at some point in the future. And essentially, I'll give a quick summary. And he's been very, very busy and active as a warden over the last month. And I guess most importantly, in the end, he does state correctly that we are entering our budget season. So that's when, I won't say all the important stuff gets done, but a lot of the important stuff gets done. You know, it helps us do another year planning and make sure that our strategic goals priorities are being met over time. And we'll talk about lots of stuff, including the potential funding of an engineering report on part of Park Drive. Couldn't resist that, Patty Durkee. Councillor Durkee.
You're winning, but you're killing me.
Yeah. So long as I'm winning, that's all. Okay, so having said that, we're at the report section. So reports from legal entities. I won't go through them all this time. Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make it quick for Councillor Hilton. We had a Western Counties Regional Library, and the province has frozen the amount of funding that they give to the libraries, and they're hurting big time. Again, thanks to our council last year when we gave the additional funds that we did. It was much appreciated. Part of the issue is that the funding is low, and therefore the salaries are really low for staffing for the library, and they're finding it really difficult to keep people. So it's a huge concern, and there'll be more information coming out about that. We have to consider our libraries have changed drastically since COVID started, and things are just changing because of technology. And kudos to our local libraries around the Southwest Nova region for pivoting and moving forward. And what they're also finding is they're being asked to do more things by the province, which really shouldn't be part of the mandate of the library. The Yarmouth and Acadian Shores, just want to point out there was a really great article that came out with the numbers of tourists to our area, which I believe was in Saltwire, and it was really positive, so that was great for us. And the Western Regional Economic Enterprise Network Liaison and Oversight Committee also met, and thanks to us and the rest of the other municipalities involved in this, we agreed to reduce the number required for, I'm brain farting, for quorum. Thank you very much to whoever said that. Exactly. For quorum to 50+1, because for 2 years we had a very difficult time trying to get quorum and get things running smoothly. So I'm excited that things are moving in the right direction. Also, very quickly, Nick, I attended a thank you for the Connector program last week, and it was very well received, and had a great conversation with Brenda LeGrandeur, and what she had mentioned, which I think is really important, and I know our warden will be really happy to hear, is they've done some studies on cell phone service, and apparently the studies show that it's really bad. It is really bad, and so one of the next projects probably will be to get involved and try to get improvements to the cell phone service, which I am extremely, extremely thankful. We're a rural community, and it's essential service, so I was excited about that. Done.
Thank you, Councillor Durkee. That last bit's good news. Thank you. Additional reports. Councillor Allen.
Just a quick update on Mariner Center. As we're moving forward with the expansion project and things, that Mariner Center has been been mandated to move like accounting services, payroll and things out on their own, and have adopted a no program. And a big thank you to Jerry Varon from the town and his team in helping the team out at Mariner Center. They're in the middle of transitioning the payroll and banking and other accounting services to the Mariner Center by April the 1st.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Additional reports from that section? Councillor Hilton.
Just because I like being a good partner, can we send a letter to Jerry saying thank you for his time and dedication to the Mariner Center? I know it was a side project for him, and it's part of his job, but I just like building those relationships, and I like Jerry, so. Would you mind if I make a motion to send a letter to Jerry Varon?
Not at all.
At the town of Yarmouth to
Well
thank him
founded.
for his time.
So we've got a mover. Councillor Durkee seconds. Any additional conversation? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thanks. Excellent idea. Okay, additional reports? Okay, so we're down to 10.3, the advisory reports. Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief update, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, the minutes of the last meeting are attached, as well as the action plan review. So the committee came up with a action plan of where we need to go over the next few years, and they're timelined out, and there are some things that have been marked complete, which are good, but we have a long way to go. But through the budgeting process, hopefully we'll move some of those things forward. We have the 2 audits one on this building and one on the Rotary Center buildings, and the Accessibility Advisory Committee has talked about that, and I think at a future, I think the next committee of the whole, they'll have some, comments on that for council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurlbert. Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick comment about the Doctor Recruitment and Retention Committee. We actually have a meeting tomorrow, but some of you may have already seen that there's a position being advertised for Community Navigator. So I'm just passing on that Rebecca Cassidy is moving on to a new position, and the Chamber with the CNOC Committee, Community Navigator Oversight Committee, will be working at hiring a new person for that position. And I also, a little tidbit of information, know there's some more good news coming after tomorrow that I'll be able to share with you. Yes, so I think I'll make a motion if we could send Rebecca Rose Cassidy a letter to thank her for the amazing job that she has done in doctor recruitment and retention thus far.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durkee. We have a mover. We've got a seconder in Councillor Allen. Any additional conversation about that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Any additional items from that report section, advisory? Okay, there being none. Ad hoc 10.4. Any from the Fence Arbitration Committee or the Mariner Center Expansion Committee? Yes, Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can somebody speak to the update maybe on the Mariner Center expansion? I know that there's some things happening, but maybe we could just give a timeline of things that will be happening in the future or where we are on that project?
I can give a little bit of an update. There's a meeting Wednesday afternoon, and we're going to be talking about who's going to be sitting on the various committees to move the project forward, but certainly I'll defer a little bit additionally to our CEO. Is there anything that you'd like to add in addition to that?
So we spent most of the day today looking at the proposals for the prime design consultant, and I expect there'll be a recommendation to the Mariner Center Expansion Steering Committee on that for their meeting Wednesday. Because the board, the Mariner Center Expansion Board, is not struck yet, the recommendation on the prime design consultant will come back up to the 3 councils from the steering committee for ratification, and you can expect work around that this week.
And I think we have a special council meeting for that Thursday night after the meeting. Yeah. Okay, good question. We're at the end of the agenda before in camera. Yes, Mr. Cox.
Can I make a question?
Yes, certainly, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for allowing the question. Basically, my question is, how does somebody signal or indicate that they wish to make a question or ask a question or make a comment at one of these meetings? Like, I'm just sort of jumped in here. I don't know if I'm following protocol or the right way to do it. So could you take a minute or two and explain how a member of the public that's actually here when proceedings are going on, if we have a question, how do we go about doing it properly?
Okay, so to answer that, really, and if I say anything wrong, I'll defer to our CEO, but here's my experience. I've been at this quite a long time, been at quite a few governance tables. So really the primary function of a council or a governance organization is really to set an agenda and debate the items. So you'll have seen that through the course of the evening, most of the items that have come to the agenda, unless they're informational type items, have had a motion. So there's actually been certainly been a reason to have the item on the agenda. There's been a motion, so there's been some action generally for staff to undertake, or a change to a bylaw or some such thing. And so the deliberation is really at the council table among the councillors. So oftentimes you'll see councillors and they're looking at each other and not necessarily at people in the audience or at the camera, because we're engaged with one another to make decisions of council. So that's basically how the governance system works, no matter which level of government. So the issue might become is, no matter what the issue, if the chair, and it's the chair's responsibility to kind of maintain order in the council chamber and follow the rules of order, Robert's rules of order, or whatever other rules of order that you have outlined in your bylaws and so forth. But the line of questioning that would come on an agenda item or comments or those types of things from the audience may actually bias the conversation in a sense, because not everybody is here from the whole community, right? So if we were talking about the road, for instance, and somebody were to say, well, what about, I don't think I want the road paid at all. So if 5 people got up and asked that question, like, how dare you, then it may bias the conversation, the decision making. So generally, how the public speaks to council is generally, in a general sense, through presentation. And then we can have, because we can review and be prepared, so, and really give good service to ourselves, the staff, and to the community, because we're prepared when like we know what's coming up, we can do our research before and have a good, fulsome conversation about a topic. Questions are okay, but generally speaking, and we don't have a lot of governance, we don't have a lot of policy or bylaw around this, obviously. We want to make it flexible, but that's not the primary focus of the council deliberation. For instance, there are mechanisms like if you've got bylaw changes, or if you've got issues like municipal planning strategy, all those types of things. Oftentimes you'll have a public hearing, so you actually have the mic set up and people can speak to the issue on multiple sides of the issue, not just for or against, but to add comment. So that allows us to do things kind of in a very, very orderly fashion. Having said that, I don't think from time to time, at the discretion of the chair, it certainly gives somebody the ability, like you did tonight, and I recognized you, to ask a question, Mr. Cox or Ron. Yeah, I hope that explains it.
Good job. Can I add to this?
Certainly, yeah.
First of all, we can thank,
Just a second, please. Mr. Chair, the people online can't hear Mr. Cox if he's not at the microphone.
Oh, Mr. Cox, do you want to come down to the mic, please? Yeah, that's a good point.
there's a button here.
Yes, please, just press it, and it stays on, Ron, yeah. And I've got to activate it here, yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, absolutely, yeah.
The point, I guess, where I'm going with this, I've talked to some citizens in the Yarmouth area, and we in a court case, you have two sides. You have a defense and a prosecution.
Yeah.
In federal government, you have usually the party in power, but there's always an opposition, and that's a good thing. You want that healthy debate. In provincial governance, you have the party in power and you have some opposition. This is all new to me, municipal politics, and one of the things I found I never realized before is that a lot of it, there doesn't seem to be anything allowed for citizens to as I say, make a comment or ask a question, bring up a concern, maybe have a little bit of debate on something, because I can't see how you can have a democracy if you don't have at least the opposite side, the other side of an issue brought forward. I don't know what can be done about that. I've heard some suggestions. People have said, well, maybe the council can allow, say, for 10 or 15 minutes at meetings, 4 questions, rather than have, I can see why decorum and you can't have just people shouting out and questions random. That wouldn't work. But maybe the council could consider having a way. It seems that the community is taking an interest all of a sudden, for whatever reason, in things. I'm noticing that everywhere. Actually, right across the country, right across the world, all of a sudden people seem to be interested for some reason. But people have got to have a voice, they've got to have a way, a mechanism to be able to say something. And just watching it and listening, that's good, but they should be, so can the council perhaps consider this, working something into the agenda where maybe 10 minutes at the beginning or halfway through or at some point where people, if there's anybody here that has a question or a comment, something could make that and get that out there. And I'm sure the people watching online or watching on Facebook, they would enjoy that as well. Because it's not just, you know, we certainly value our leaders, our councilors and what they're doing, but they need, at the same time, to hear from the actual people out there.
So,
That's it.
so thanks for the question, and what we'll do is we'll take the question, say, we recorded the question, and we will think about it as a council, certainly. That's what
Thank you very
we'll
much.
say. Thank you, Mr. Cox. And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. It is nice to have lots of people in the audience, and it really, when you go around and knock on the doors, it'll be fantastic to have people, because I know some are from my district, and you know, the more aware everybody is to Mr. Cox's point, and more involved, the better government is. So, thank you very much. So, I think any additional comment from council on any item this evening, or a motion to go on camera, seconded? Councillor Hurlbert. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, motion carried. Thank you, council. Excellent meeting.